Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here with us this morning. Our event is being recorded. We want to respect everyone's privacy and confidentiality, so just keep that in mind as you share that the event is being recorded. Last year we had an incredible event, and some people needed to talk to someone to process some things after. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. My name is Stacy. Feel free to approach me if you have any questions or you need a moment with someone. I'm here to support. There will be another counselor here later, and I'll make sure that she gets introduced. So before we begin, I'd like everyone to join us in taking a collective pause. So we want to take a breath together. And I'll use some words found from in the book Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. So I want to ask you all to get comfortable in your seats and just pay attention to your breath. Just notice for a moment how your breath feels, how it sounds, and find its rhythm. No need to change it. Just pay attention. Stay here for a few moments, giving it your full attention. We're going to take a few deep breaths together in a moment. But before I begin, I would like to read you a quote that will guide us in our pause today. Here you are in the cycle between the past and the future, choosing to spend your miraculous time in the exploration of how humans, especially those seeking to grow liberation and justice, can learn from the world around us how best to collaborate, how to shape change. Now, together, I would like us to take some deep belly breaths. So if you are comfortable, put your hand on your heart or your belly or anywhere you feel comfortable. Just touch your body. I want you to be connected to your body. And now together, I want everyone to take a deep inhale through the nose, fill the belly with air, and exhale through the mouth. Again, deep inhale through the nose, fill the belly with air, and exhale through the mouth. Deep inhale, fill the belly with air, and exhale hard through the mouth. And I want you to continue your deep belly breaths as we collectively take some breaths together to honor this space and what we're about to do together. So while continuing your deep breaths, I ask you to take a breath for our ancestors, those who have gone before us. Deep inhale and exhale. A breath for the land that we're on and those who it was taken from. Deep inhale and exhale. For this precious moment, which cannot be recreated. Deep inhale and exhale. For all the days that you've had so far and all that you have overcome. Deep inhale and exhale. For this work that we will do today together. Deep inhale and exhale. And lastly, for all the good that lies ahead of us. Deep inhale and exhale. Thank you all for taking that pause with me. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Frazier now, who will share her opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this event today. Today is our 32nd anniversary. So the Institute officially was founded by Arthur Ashe 32 years ago yesterday. December 3rd. And he was intentional of finding the institute and creating it at SUNY Downstate. And some of the key things that he wanted us to focus on, and this is what we are doing now in our community, is to have community engagement and making sure that we were educating community members about the work, educating people about health, and addressing health inequities. And so that's one of the things that we do through our community engagement, our community research programs, where we go out into beauty salons, barbershops, faith-based organizations, and talk to people about health, conduct research in those settings as well. The second key thing was to increase people of color in the health professions, and we do that through our Health Science Academy program. Traditionally, it was a 10th through 12th grade program, and students would come at Downstate. These are students that are interested in health and health professions, and they would come to Downstate. Initially, when they come, they're thinking of only nursing and medicine as health professions, but at Downstate, they get exposed to all the other professions. Public health, they get exposed to occupational therapy, physical therapy, research, and a whole host of things that happen at Downstate. And we are so fortunate because the folks at SUNY Downstate, the students, are the ones that also serve as our instructors for our students. So they're not too far removed from our students, but our students also get to see them in such a light and also get to model behavior. And we have brought that program even earlier, so we have a middle school component and a ninth grade bridge component, and we're trying to create a pathway to the health professions. And so that's the second thing. The third thing is partnerships, strategic partnerships. And we do that with SUNY Downstate faculty and members here, but we also have a host of community-based partners and community-based organizations that we partner with. One of which is the Communities Together for Health Equity. That's a consortium of about 70 community-based organizations across New York City. The Institute leads that consortium. And these are organizations that are focused on social determinants of health. So we know that although health issues happen, there are other issues that are even more important that contribute to poor outcomes, whether people have access to care, whether people have housing, whether people have food, and so forth, immigration, and all of those things. And so that's the third thing, making sure that we have these robust community partnerships and strategic partnerships, the ones that we have with our barbers, our stylists, faith-based institutions, academic institutions, community-based organizations, and so forth. And also our high schools and so forth. The fourth thing is policy, making sure that we are informing and impacting policy and that we are aware of the policy implications. Because we can do all this work that we are doing, and if policies do not change, if systems do not change, then the work is to naught, right? So those are the things that Arthur was very keen on doing and instilling, and his legacy lives on 32 years later in the work that we do. Today's program is focused on mental health, and one of the reasons that we talk about mental health is that post-COVID, we recognize that so many things happen, right? And people went through a whole lot. And mental health, when we asked our communities, that came up to be like to the forefront. And today we want to talk about mental health in a safe space, and I want you to feel safe in this space. As Stacy mentioned, if anyone needs to talk, if you need to step out, feel free to do that. We have a wonderful program today set up for you. You'll hear from our keynote, then we have a power building session and discussion. We'll break out into groups because at the last symposium, it was suggested that we have some breakout sessions, so we'll have some of those today as well. We'll come back for lunch. You'll have a wonderful lunch, I promise you. And then we'll have, in our afternoon session, you'll hear about poetry, and you'll have some poets that will talk to you. We also have a men's mental health panel, and that would be facilitated by Dr. Kishore Malavade. And then at the end, we'll have a sound bath experience. And so what we aim to do with this session is to think outside of the box and to think differently when we think about mental health, and think of it in terms of culture, spiritual, and all the different aspects that come into play when we talk about mental health. So I want you to have a great session today. So on behalf of the staff of the Arthur Ashe Institute, on behalf of the board of directors, I welcome you today, and I trust that you'll have a wonderful session, and I trust that it'll be an interactive session, and it'll be different than when you come in, and you would leave different than when you came in, and you would have felt better for being here today. So thank you so much. So at this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker to you. And Dr. Lena Green, you have information in your little flyer, and you have all the information regarding the bios for our presenters. So I'm not going to read through too much of it, but I want you to know that Dr. Lena Green comes with a mass of expertise in the field. And she's associate professor and project manager at Hope Center. She's an executive director there. And she's also the associate professor and project manager of population health science and policy at the ICANN School of Medicine at Mount Sinai. She's also a clinical professor at NYU and Columbia University Schools of Social Work. And she is also someone that has had a lot of experience as a clinician, integrating faith-based and mental health together into the work that she has been doing. She has received numerous awards and accolades. She was also part of the 2023 Joseph R. Biden Presidential Service and Lifetime Achievement Award winners. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you, and I ask that you give Dr. Lena Green a warm welcome as she comes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier, for that warm welcome. I am connected to a faith-based institution called First Corinthian Baptist Church. And so I'm incredibly excited to be here with you all today. And I like a little bit more feedback. So I'm going to say good morning again with all my enthusiasm and excitement. I traveled all the way from Harlem to be with you all this morning. So good morning again. Good morning. All right. So we're going to spend our time talking a little bit about our program and what we do at the Hope Center in partnership with Mount Sinai Hospital. We're going to discuss the importance of building partnerships and community building. I heard Dr. Frazier mention that earlier. And then we're going to talk about some strategies for engaging and retaining people in mental health and wellness programming. I like to think that we do that pretty well. And I'm someone who is very outside of the box in terms of my thinking, in terms of my practice, in terms of what I encourage my staff to do, as well as the faith leaders that we work with. So we're going to do a lot of learning today, but I also want us to get a little bit cozy, okay? So we're going to be talking to each other as well. So I'd like to start this off because I'm going to be talking to you about our teams and our program Thrive today as well, about one of the examples in how we engage community and how we retain and maintain our contact, specifically with one of our population-based services, which is focusing on decreasing the rate of suicide, specifically in Black and Latino teens. Okay, but that's our kids. This is on our Hope Center Sunday, which we essentially get to take over the entire church service, which is like unheard of. So it's really exciting, and we do this once a year. And our children are talking about the impact of mental health and providing some statistics. And this is actually right on the pulpit at the church. So I always like to start with that because it's a good representation of who we are and what we do. All right, so that's a little bit about me. You heard about me, so I won't bore you with all that information. All right, so let's start off being a little conversational with one another. And so my first question to you all, I'd like you to answer the question, what is community and how do you build community? All right, so we're gonna give ourselves 2 minutes to do that. I'm gonna ask you like we do in church, turn to your neighbor. Okay, and so let's do that for 2 minutes and engage in that conversation. So what is a community and how do you specifically build community? All right. All right. So I am so sorry to cut off such good conversations, but I'm going to ask us to come on back together. That was a quick 2.5 minutes of discussion, so thank you all so much. Is anyone feeling courageous enough to share either what you shared personally or what your group shared about A, what is a community, and then two, how do you build community? Any takers? All right. Okay, yes. Okay.
So we were discussing that, talking to each other about not very personal things, but one person mentioned, oh, how's your kids or how's your grandkids? Or how are you feeling today? I mentioned like we share food in the morning, or who has bread, do you have some jelly? Those things like that. Checking in on each other's mental health. How you feeling today? What's going on?
Okay.
Those things help make our
All right. So we've got breaking bread together or checking in on one another, doing that through conversation. That's how we build community. One more? Yes? Yes? Uh-huh. Shared experiences. Uh-huh.
Have those shared experiences. But also, I don't know, maybe this is just on my heart, but the way I'm feeling now are that community is somebody or something that shows up and that is committed to do the work.
Okay.
I'm going to share my story.
Okay.
Because you gave me a mic.
We
But I
welcome
was
it.
saying, like, now, I attempt to create partnerships with people in the community or organizations. And people will do the paper. They'll sign the paper. But it's like, will they do the work? Will they commit to what we're trying to do as a community? So community, for me, shows up. A community is committed to the cause. In a community, we share those, like, experiences, but we also want to learn, right?
Yeah.
So that's it.
All right. Thank you. And we'll take one more if someone is like, has a burning desire to share. Anybody else? Okay.
Hello, my name's Jerome Archer. How do you build your community? First of all, for me, it's more of being consistent, showing up every day, having the right information. First, figuring out your target,
Okay.
where you need to, promote what you're bringing to the community and how to express it and get people to join in. So just being consistent, having the right information that I received through Arthur Ashe for 21 years now. So that helps me give back to my community.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate all of those definitions. Please give yourselves a round of applause. And so that's an important question that I ask you all because I believe that our mental health and well-being actually takes place in community, right? And so while I have all these, degrees and letters behind my name and blah, 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 it's really about connecting with other people, right? We don't get hurt. We don't, decompensate in spaces in isolation, which also means that we don't heal in isolation, that we need one another in order to be well and in order to be mentally healthy. Right? Whether it's connecting, whether it's sharing a resource or providing education, we can't do it alone. And so oftentimes when I'm asking folks about, what's going on with them, many people say isolation or I feel alone, right? And what surprised me, actually, I learned this really during the pandemic, was I thought it was mostly going to be seniors, but a lot of our young adults and a lot of our teenagers are saying that they feel alone. And that shocked me a little bit. Right? Because, if you are senior, you have more mobility challenges sometimes. I know a lot of times our seniors working with them, they were like, they don't want to come out of the home. They're not going to the spaces where they once were for various reasons. But when I heard it from the young adults, right, it took me some time to really understand a little bit more about, well, what else is going on for them, right? And so these are some of the definitions of community. And the places that we find community, right? So it could be a place, it could be a population, it could be a political system, a social organization, right? A cultural system, a social unit, a unified body of individuals. Communities can be defined by shared place such as neighborhood, town, or country, or by a shared set of characteristics such as our values, culture, religion, or identity. It's also a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing, and some of you said this already, common attitudes, interests, and goals. And so that is really how we build community, right? And that to me is really how we came to be in terms of our programming at the Hope Center. So it helps us, think about distinguishing ourselves as people, our stories, they have meetings, and they're a really important part of who we are as our identity, right? They carry deep personal, cultural, familial, and historical connections to who we are, right? And it's also the story specifically around Black mental health when I'm thinking about it, right? Specifically because I'm providing a service that is connected to a Black church, which the story behind Black mental health comes with a lot of challenges, right? Historical adversity, which includes being enslaved, sharecropping, race-based exclusion from healthcare systems, educational systems, economic resources, which also translates to disparities experienced by particular communities, right? Socioeconomic status is also linked to mental health outcomes, including poverty, homelessness, and incarceration, and it leaves us at higher risk for poor mental health, right? And so what ends up happening is that specifically when folks are excluded, they end up being sicker, specifically Black people, sicker and sicker longer, right? So it takes a longer time to recover, right? And some of that is based on mistrust of the systems that we have engaged in, right? We know that racism continues to have an impact on mental health, and we know that negative stereotypes continue to exist, which also lead to adverse outcomes, right? So those challenges may lead to, help-seeking behavior, right? So if you're afraid to seek help, then that means you really may not be connected to the services that you need in order to be well or get well, right? And then we know that negative treatment for certain populations has led to distrust of authorities, right? So in community, we also learned our stories and oral traditions around mental health, right? We know that stigma has been passed down, right? So for many of us, it has been, that's, Uncle Charlie. He's just not right in the head, right? Or for many of us who grew up connected to faith-based institutions, it has been if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling anxious. Can anyone tell me where they would traditionally tell you to take it? To the Lord in prayer. Take it to the altar, right? And so that means that for many of us, if we are raised with strong faith, many of us end up feeling like we haven't prayed the right prayer. We haven't sought the Lord long enough and hard enough for this, right? And so my tagline is, especially with working with faith-based communities, it's prayer and therapy. Right? We need both, right? If you can go to the doctor because your leg is hurting or your heart's not feeling so great, right? Or your elbow is not bending the way it should, then if you're not feeling well, your mind is not feeling solid, if you're not feeling right, then that too warrants us going to the doctors or going to the folks that can help us get well and feel better, right? And so that leads us, well, who can we trust, right? And then where do we go for trusted places and spaces? Right? And so that's where really the house of worship has really come into play. So we have worked with clergy and faith leaders as frontline workers. We're leading and learning together, right? I'm actually working on an initiative right now with the American Medical Association called Release the Pressure. And we're focusing on heart health, right? Because 80% of Black Americans have some sort of heart health condition. And 50% of Black women over the age of 20, 50% over the age of 20 have a heart health issue, right? And so those are pretty shocking numbers, right? But it means that we've got a lot of work to do. And we've got to think about ideal places to reach people because the information is not getting out there. And so we have to be creative about going into the places and the spaces where folks can feel connected, where they feel like they can be trusted, and we can get the word out. So that's us on Hope Center Sunday. So that's our choir. And we have the big Hope in the back. And so the Hope Center started really through our pastor, Pastor Mike Walren, who was really transparent about his own mental health issues from the pulpit. He has an autoimmune disease that he found out he was suffering with pretty early on, like around 7 or 8 years old. And so he's had chronic health conditions pretty much his whole life. He was pretty transparent about his own battles as it relates to mental health and his own wellness. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the doctors told his parents that he wouldn't live past the age of like 27, right? He's over 50 now, yay. But those are the things that you live with, right? When you're trying to think about, the things that impact your life, right? You get a diagnosis early on, and so maybe you feel like you don't have a lot to live for. So he's been pretty transparent about those challenges. And so he was able to have open discussions about therapy from the pulpit. And so you might think, oh, well, that's not a big deal. But I'm gonna ask you all, how many of you have ever been in a faith-based setting where you've heard anything around mental health from the faith leader? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 5. Right? But it's not often. And so if we think about who is leading in spaces, right, those messages carry a lot of weight. And so if our leaders can say, hey, I'm struggling, I need support with my mental health, then maybe that translates well for someone else, right? So we started with one clinician on site at the House of Worship, and it was available to all of the members of the congregation. And we learned that quickly there was a huge need for services. But people were also a little skittish about going into the church and telling the security guard, I'm here to see the therapist, right? And so we had to think about, well, maybe we should think about confidentiality. We should think about a separate space. And so in 2016, the Hope Center was born in December 15th. So we've got a birthday coming up. Yay, us. We'll be 8 years old. Yes, thank you. And so I've been the executive director there for 4 years. I've actually been working in ministry at the church for the past 18 and a half, working with youth and working with young adults. And then during the pandemic, my pastor called and said, I have a question for you. And I was like, what is it? He's like, will you please come and run the mental health center? And I was like, I need to pray about that, right? Because I was working for city government. I had a good city government job that I worked for 20 years. And I was like, ooh, my pension. I don't know about this, right? That was real for me. But I ultimately said yes because it was an opportunity for me to transform what we were doing in our community. And I had a lot of ideas because working in city government, it was really a public health issue, right? And so I've been working essentially as a public health clinician for 20 plus years. And I thought, well, I could take all that I've learned and apply that to the community and see that if we can make some radical change here. So our mission is to provide quality therapeutic services to the Harlem community and beyond, to directly impact mental health needs and promote health and wellness. Our vision really overall is to empower, and support our community in the process of creating and sustaining lifelong wellness. So we'll get into a little bit more of our demographics later. And so here are our services. So we provide, it's a short-term treatment model, but we provide 12 sessions. And our therapists, which you'll see in a few minutes, provide everything from IPT to CBT to somatic therapy. We provide a host of groups, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, our wellness initiatives. We also have conferences, and we call the folks that we provide services to innovators. We actually don't call them patients or clients, and I have a slide for that. And then if they are in need of longer treatment, we refer them elsewhere. And then we also have a psychiatry rotation in partnership with Mount Sinai Hospital, where we're able to also provide medication management. And then these are some of the things that we provide online virtually, right? So a little bit about staff diversity, which is incredibly important because we're working predominantly in a community of color. And so we have largely our staff is made up of clinical social workers. We have psychiatrists, we have a clinical psychologist, we have ministers, we have deacons, we have mental health coaches, we have a ton of interns that work with us, specifically from various social work schools from around the city. The majority of our students come from both NYU and Columbia. And then we also have public health students who join us from CUNY School of Public Health, which is actually located on 125th Street in Harlem. So we have a strong partnership with them as well. And so I just wanted to touch on really quickly the role of our faith leaders, right? Because people might be like, well, what would they be doing? So Oftentimes people come in and they're looking for prayer requests, right, from the faith leaders, whether that's our deacons or sometimes our trustees or our ministers and our pastors. But what we've done is train our faith leaders in mental health first aid. So they've been trained. They've also been trained by me to, recognize signs and symptoms of depression, so that when people are coming in for prayer requests, right, and this is a very real thing, and they call and they say, I no longer want to be on this earth, and I've been thinking about suicide, and I just want you to pray for me. Or I am calling for prayer because I've been in a domestic violence relationship for the past 15 years, and I'm not sure know what to do with myself or my 2 young children. Or I've been struggling with alcohol, and I just need some prayer. And that's great, because they're going to get the prayer. But they also need to know what to do with that information after they pray. So they are clear about praying with folks and then giving a warm handoff over to the Hope Center. So they've been given information about how to talk about mental health. They've been trained in that. Many of them also have mental health coaching certificates. We are a part of something called Choose Healthy Life, which is a faith-based initiative with our faith leaders as health navigators. So they get a ton of training and a ton of opportunities for them to engage in health and wellness and specifically work with us. And then we also engage in, various other ways that we touch the community. And I just put that up there, our Breakfast Before Books program. So we feed the community every morning, 5 days a week, and we provide breakfast Monday through Friday to anyone who needs it. Specifically, it's targeted toward children, but anyone who needs it in the morning. And that's also a way to provide information to the community. Okay. So we know that these are the factors impacting mental health, right? So cultural and societal narratives. We know that our genetics, stigma, we know that isolation, which you talked about earlier, early sexual abuse, family dysfunction, food insecurity, social media, of course, trauma, and housing insecurity. And that, I dare say, is a short list of things, right? But here's our team. And I'm particularly proud of our team because it's important to me that we reflect the community that we are actually serving, right? And so we have a lot of diversity here. And as you can see, the bottom row makes up the majority of our clinical students. They're all second-year students, so we only take second-year advanced standing students from various universities, and occasionally we may take a first-year student, depending on whether or not they have some background in mental health and wellness in some way, shape, or form. But collectively, our staff speaks Korean, Chinese, Spanish, and Hindu. Okay. And this is our impact. This is who we're serving. So we have from ages 12 to 93. 30% of our folks identify as LGBTQ+. We have an increase, which I'm very proud of, in serving our seniors, and then also specifically serving our teens. So our model at the Hope Center is really to deliver culturally sensitive care in a trusted setting, right? And what I like to say is that, over the past 8 years, we've been able to develop some good street cred, right? So yes, people get information about the Hope Center, right? But the best referral to me is word of mouth, right? Because that means that someone had an excellent experience and they're willing to tell somebody about it, right? Because if you had a terrible experience, guess what else you're gonna do? Tell somebody about it. Now, right, we're not on Yelp, so you can't go and, give us a bad review per se, but you can certainly start sharing that information, and communities can be really large or communities can be really small, right? And so it's important to us and important to me to ensure that folks are getting a really excellent experience when they enter the door, specifically because we work with a population that has been historically mistreated. And so I want them to know that as soon as they walk through the door, from that first phone call or that first email interaction, that they are treated with care, with kindness, with love, and with respect. We also want to deliver evidence-based treatment, right? So all of our services are free, and all of our therapists are very highly trained. Specifically, we have a partnership with Columbia University's Center for Complicated Grief. And so many folks don't know this, but there is, during COVID, many of you know during COVID, communities of color were hit pretty hard. And a lot of folks were still dealing with severe symptoms around grief post-COVID. And there is a diagnosis called prolonged grief disorder, which means that you've been struggling to recover from grief beyond 1 year. And so the Center for Complicated Grief provides training, and so I'm very proud to say that our entire staff is trained and certified in complicated grief services, and we also provide groups and individual services around that. We work very heavily from a strengths-based approach. We want to make sure that we are culturally inclusive, and we want to make sure that we are thinking about how stigma impacts our community, our role, our language. So we're really sensitive to that. And then we have a lot of flexibility in our service delivery. So we are open Monday through Saturday. We have evening hours. We also offer virtual services in addition to being able to provide services in person. Right? And I would say, post-COVID, when sort of the anxiety settled down, that those requests for services in person, have increased dramatically. Just want to check how I'm doing on time here. Okay. And so this is our faith-based model of community engagement, right? So there's a mantra that says, nothing for us without us, right? Nothing for us without us. So that means that we are, forming strong partnerships in the community. We are assessing the community needs. So every so often, probably every couple of months, we send out a survey to everyone who is connected to us on our newsletter or folks that we just engage in the street, because I'm very personable and I like to hear, people's ideas. We identify leaders who will support the cause, right? Because if folks can be champions for mental health and champions for the services that we are providing, they're gonna be good spokespersons for us, right? They're gonna be enthusiastic, they're gonna be engaging, they're gonna be able to touch the community and get folks in the door. We want to take the time to set the context, so we want to understand, well, what's been happening here? What's happening in this community? We don't want to go in blindly. And then we want to honor the community's culture, right? So that means that we have to ask the questions. This is something that we'd like to do. Does this make sense? Do you think this would actually work? Do you think people would come? Right? Those are the kinds of things that we're talking about. Right? Because a lot of times, folks have a lot of great ideas, and they're like, hey, we're going to do this thing, and then no one shows up, and they're like, well, what happened? Well, it's because you probably didn't take time to set the context or to understand, the importance of the things that are important to a particular community, right? And then we want to think about promoting culturally inclusive mental health services that are desperately needed in communities of color, right? So we've developed and tested strategies that significantly increase the participation of communities of color in mental health programming. So again, going back to some of the things that we talked about, flexibility in our programming, using marketing materials that are racially concordant with the target population. And I'll just give you a quick example of that. We wanted to work with a very well-known national organization, and they said, we're gonna send you all of our materials that are gonna be great for promotion and getting out in the community. And I just busted out laughing. And the person is like, what's so funny? I said, what's so funny is that there's nobody on any of these materials that look like me. That's what's funny. And so if you think you're gonna come to Harlem and you want me to promote this program, but none of the folks even have a hint of melanin, I don't think that that's gonna work here, right? And they're like, well, what should we do? And I said, well, we can certainly help you with that, right? But it's those kinds of things, right? Going into communities and providing a service that you think is great, that's not reflective of anybody that you're trying to provide the services to. Right? So that's what we're talking about when we're saying culturally inclusive, culturally sensitive, taking time to set the context. Right? What else can I share with you? I talked about the credible messengers, and then thinking about framing programming as an issue of social justice. Right? What do we believe that our community members have a right to? Right? Our right to dignity, to respect, to access to care. And so all of our services are free because we want to make sure that we're eliminating the things that get in the way of people actually accessing the services. And so we do that with our partnerships. And I talked a little bit about, where we partner and who we partner with. but we are intentional about recruiting clinicians of color, clinicians who are interested in community-based care. That's actually an area of specialization. Clinicians who are interested in integrating faith and spirituality in mental health. I've been a professor for a very long time, and although we work with many folks from around the globe, spirituality and mental health is not really something that is actually taught in academia. And so we're helping to provide new language and give a new model of what that could look like, right? Because if we're scared to touch the conversation, doesn't mean you have to be a person of faith in any way, shape, or form, but it means that you need to be able to engage people in the conversation about the things that are important to them. And so if someone tells you that they go to the mosque or they go to the temple 3 or 4 days a week, but you're afraid to think about that as a strength or a place where they can be socially connected, then we're not thinking about the core of who the person is, okay? All right, these are just more fun pictures of what we're doing. So here's a little bit about, the kinds of services that we provide. So every year we do the month of hope. April is actually the month of hope. And so we go, like our programming is like on steroids, and we like take over the city for like a whole entire month, and it's really fun. But we do something called the Power of Our Stories every year, where we focus on a different population. This year we focused on aging and mental health, and so we did a documentary for our seniors, and hearing our stories from our seniors. We have services focused on the LGBTQ plus population. This is our chair and yoga specifically for seniors. And then we do things called healing conversations, where we invite experts in to talk a little bit about a topic that is important. And so here are our population-based services. And so I'm throwing up this quote from your founder, our founder for today. And that is really starting where you are and using what you have and doing what you can. During the pandemic, we received a lot of calls from parents and teachers to say, I need to be able to provide services to my teens. And I would give them a referral, and they would come back to me in 2 or 3 days to say, the waiting list for services for my teenager who is currently suicidal is 1.5 years. What am I supposed to do with that? And I didn't have an answer, because at the time we were not serving teenagers. I'm like, we don't do that here. We serve folks who are 18 years and older, and so I can give you some more resources to figure something out in the community. And they kept coming back, and they kept saying, we don't have any place to send our kids. And so I said, okay, what do we have, what can we do, and how can we be creative? And so in the interest of time, this is a little bit about, the story that I'm telling you right now with regard to our our teens. But it's important to note that the teen suicide crisis, specifically among Black youth, as of 2018 became the second leading cause of death for kids between the ages of 10 and 14 and adolescents between 15 and 19, and that has not changed. That has not changed. And so when parents are calling you because they are fearful of whether or not their child will wake up the next morning, I figured we have to do something, and we started with what we had. And so we had a conversation in 2021, SOS, right, saving our sons, and what could we do about it? I then petitioned Nike for almost a year to say, would you be able to provide some funding for us to be able to support our teens? And they said yes, and they funded us for 2 years. I don't know if we have enough time or if my video will work, but I'd like to share this with you.
My name is Kennedy.
My name is Jessie, and we thrive.
My name is Ziggy, and I thrive.
I'm Casey. I'm Kylie.
And we thrive.
My name is Josiah, and I thrive.
Yay! Thrive shirt on.
Thrive program means to me that you have like other people that goes through the same thing as you, but you don't say anything, but we could come together as a group so we all could talk about it.
The Thrive program is a program that helps young people and teenagers with mental health. It serves as a way to have a stress-free life. They tell you how to function with other people. They tell you how to have a better social life. So I think that's really good.
The Thrive program means to have fun, to respect, love, and accept each other. I've had a great time so far. I've made new friends. I've made new counselors and staff that care about all of us, and I made new friendships.
The Thrive program to me means to try to be open-minded, not all the time, but most of the time. Try new experiences, and I got to meet new people. I've made a lot of friends, and I really like the counselors.
I think mental health is important for black and brown teens like myself because I feel like as black people and as a teen, a black boy, it's harder for me to do certain things that other people can do. And I feel like I need to have that mindset to know that I have to be better because I need to show other people who are either younger than me or just know less than I do that the way we have to think and move as a black and brown teen.
Like recently, a lot of kids have really died lately, and they were mainly African Americans. And some of the kids were dying because of mental health or gun violence. So with mental health, people are dying from mental health because they didn't have a person around to talk to. And when they don't have somebody to talk to, they just think about dying because that's the only thing that comes to their head. That's why I'm thankful for my mom for putting me in this program, so I could talk to people about my feelings. But yeah, I have a wonderful mom, a wonderful dad, a wonderful grandparents, a wonderful family system to talk to. But I felt like Thrive was just an extra booster for me to let go of my feelings.
Somebody my age, like just teens in general, should join Thrive because it teaches them a lot about Black history. It's a way for them to like communicate with somebody, even if they're like they don't want to tell someone or something like that. They could like vent to Thrive.
I feel like they should join Thrive mainly because, first off, I wasn't really worried about mental health before this. And then after I joined Thrive, I started taking care of my mental health a lot more because they're helping me see that mental health and physical health, they can both take a toll on you no matter what. So I'd say you should join it because it does help you kind of take a load of stress off your shoulders, stops you from having so many burdens. Now, I can't say that it's gonna help everyone, but it helps me, so it might help you too.
We are Thrive!
Yay.
And cut. I have to cut the video.
We started with what we had and continued to move forward. And since that time, we've had 3 cohorts of 25 teens. We have monthly sessions, weekly sessions when we're able to do so. We engage our teens in community service, as well as a host of mental health resources and services when they come to us. And then we incorporate teen voice and choice, so we give them an opportunity to tell us what works well for them. And then we do our best to create that environment. So that's a little bit about some of the things that we do with our kids. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about stigma and share with you all, the things that we do intentionally to combat that. And one is that we don't use the word patient or client. We use the word innovator. And what is an innovator? It is someone who makes healing a lifestyle. It's someone who is courageously engaging in their pain points of their current narrative to transform their wounds into wellness. We do our best to not use stigmatizing language, including when we're providing, daily services, right? And so even when we say things like, traditionally, of course, this is a hospital, so traditionally we say things like treatment plan, right? Well, we've changed those words to things like wellness journey, right? To ensure that our language is a little bit more approachable and friendly. And then we wear our wellness. We wear what we believe. So we believe that folks are worthy. We believe that they can be their authentic selves. We believe that they are blessed. We believe that, healing is a lifestyle, right? And so these are the things that we do. And so that stuff is for sale as well. It's one of the ways in which we fundraise. And so, just to sort of leave you all with a couple of things about this journey and the way in which the mental health program has come to develop over time, is that I want you all to think about, when you're working with folks, that houses of worship are ideally suited to promote health and wellness. Right? And so if you haven't been able to engage a house of worship, I want you to be thinking about that, because that is where you can find a lot of people, and especially the people in the community that we're trying to serve. That community-partnered engagement helps to foster and expand academic partnerships, right? And so we are intentional about who we engage, both academically, but also spiritually, but also with, as it relates to research. And then we talked a little bit about this earlier with regard to, community-based participatory research, right? And so including the voices of the people that we are trying to serve. And so here's another quote from Arthur Ashe. Right, true heroism is remarkably sober, very undramatic. It is not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost. Right, and so if you have, a commitment to health equity, if you have a commitment to transforming your community and with the gifts and the tools and the resources that you have, that it doesn't have to always be this grand thing. It is the things that we do on a daily basis that make who we are and what we're trying to do better in this world. And so here are a few of our I am statements that I'm going to ask you to join me in saying out loud, which is what we do with our folks as well. And so if you can, on the count of 3, if you can just say those out loud with me and declare those things out loud to the universe, I would much appreciate it. So 1, 2, and 3. I am worthy, I am unstoppable, and I am the embodiment of infinite possibilities. So here's my favorite quote by Frederick Douglass, which really helps to motivate all the things that I do in this world, and that is that it is easier to build strong children than it is to fix broken men. So thank you so much for your time. This is the information for the Hope Center, and I hope I shared some good information with you all and you learned something new. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Green. I have time for 1 or 2 questions. So if there's a burning question that somebody would like to ask, Dr. Green, before you leave. Could somebody please share a mic for me, please? Thank you.
Speak louder. I
No,
just
no,
wanted to
just
ask
because
if she also goes into other health faith-based homes, and also could this be shared as well?
Yes, yes, and yes. So when other faith-based institutions ask, how is it that you're doing this, we're happy to come in and talk to them about how we do it, about the financing that it takes to be able to run a program like this. And we're currently actually working with Jamani Williams' office to participate in a clergy roundtable in January. Because we're trying to get the word out to other faith leaders across the city about how to engage with mental health services. Now, it may not be, on the same level as this, but we want to make sure that we're sharing some of the knowledge and the resources that we've been able to acquire over the years to at least help them get started and at least point their congregations in the right direction. So thank you for the question. Okay, well, I don't create the list, but I can certainly get your name on the list. I'm working with the person who is in charge of that in our public advocate's office, and so I'm happy to share that information. Absolutely. Yes. Yes, ma'am. If we are invited, absolutely. So both myself and my colleague, Dr. Hankerson, we call ourselves the dynamic duo, so we love a good road show. So we're happy to come out if we're invited. Yes. Okay. Sorry, 1, 2, and then 3. Oh, got it. Go ahead, Martha. Oh, the Thrive program. Yeah, so with our grant from Nike, we were able to provide 10 weekly sessions that focused on social emotional learning. We did a lot of work around mental health. We did a lot of work around suicide prevention. We go out into the community. They do community service. We take them, bowling. It's sort of a combination of things. And so it's myself, it's another mental health clinician, it's someone who has a background in education, and then it's also our mental health coaches. And so we have around 25 students. Right now we're between 18 and 20 for this last cohort. And we just try to make sure that we are available to them during that 10 to 12 week session. And then when we're not doing the weekly programming, we do monthly programming. They also get a stipend, so they get a gift card for $25. They get an Amazon gift card for $25 every time they show up. And our program, when we are doing it weekly or monthly, is from 4 to 6 p.m. We also feed them because we know that many of our students are food insecure. So they're able to come and get a hot meal, work with mental health clinicians, get some activities, do some learning, and we talk about everything from, the shootings that happen in Buffalo or Albany to, what's happening in the news, and giving them tools and resources to be, emotionally, psychologically resilient. Yeah. And we did create a curriculum, so we have that as well. Last question. Oh, 2. Go for it.
Phenomenal. I think everyone heard me, right? I just wanted to commend her for the great work that she's doing, and I thought it was phenomenal. I have 10-year-old twins and twin girls, and they go through a lot emotionally, and they've gone through a lot, right? And as you even speak about the statistics of suicide, my heart just cringed when I heard it. So my question is, in regard to the Thrive program, how early or how young do you accept children? Because I heard 13, I heard 18, and I think it would be great. I don't know if you accept children as young as 10, or I'm not sure, but that was my question. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. So we serve 12 to 18 years of age, and so that's sort of the cutoff time. And so we have that program, and then we have another program, and sometimes we take middle schoolers. So we work with another program called the Josephine Herrick Project, which focuses on photography. And so we actually have that going on right now. We've been doing that. It's a 10-week program where they come and learn photography skills, and they're able to tell their story from their lens. And then at the end of that 10 to 12 week session, we do a culminating exhibit. So that's something that they might be able to participate in. Again, all of our services in Harlem, so it's a little far from Brooklyn. Oh, you're in the Bronx. Okay, great. So as long as they can get there, we do make exceptions specifically for the photography program. For the Thrive program, they have to be between the ages of 12 and 18. So. Yep.
Yes, congratulations. I really like the
Thank you.
presentation. My daughter goes to the same church.
Oh.
Ida Brown, you probably know Ida. And I've been to the church a few times.
I've seen you before.
Yeah, it's great, great. 2 things I want to say. One, I think that the culture that Reverend Mike creating a new environment where young people, I've seen a lot of young people have an issue with it, with sexual orientation or feeling stuff, because it's an open environment that I think provide that first level of trust, right? And I raise that question because I think the issue about linking faith and spirituality, and people assume that because something is religious, is spiritual, that it goes in the direction of helping the kids. Sometimes it produces the total opposite, right? So I think in that area, I think it would be very interesting how much the initiative that you all are taking start educating people that beside of whatever is your religious denomination, whatever your biblical messaging, you have to pay attention to the issues of mental health as something separate. I do, like the Latino churches, I'm from Latin America originally, and a lot of the traditional church, right, do not provide that. The kids opposite. The kids end up very conservative, feel rejected, hide from addressing some of the issue of sexual orientation and other factors. So I'm just thinking that if this kind of work can become where you have a more dialogue with a diverse, different religious sectors understanding mental health and the purpose of addressing this kind of social issues, I think it would be great. In a city that's complex as New York, right, with the diversity and the different complex religious practices.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And yet, you're right, right? Many houses of worship, regardless of the denomination, are not accepting of a lot of things. And so I think we do well because we are a very affirming space. And we say, regardless of, what is it that you believe or practice or how you feel or who you are, how you identify, you are accepted here because we want to love you, we want to support you, and we want to help guide you with the right information and tools. And so the only thing that we can do is teach our, sort of our motto, in hopes that that message will resonate with others as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Tremonisha Lamy. She is the founder and CEO of Javelin Consulting, and she also comes with a lot of experience as a practitioner, a researcher, motivational speaker, a leadership coach. And so her bio is here, so I'll let you all read that and see all the wonderful things that she has done. But at this time, I'd just like to call her to the podium. And so she is going to speak to you today about power building. So welcome her as she comes.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes, this work requires energy and action. I'm really excited to come and talk to you today about power and impact and thinking through community power building and the work that you do individually and the work that we can all do collectively. Okay? I want us to be, and this to be an engaging presentation, so please feel free to interrupt me if you have a question about something. And I'm going to be asking you all some things to kind of do a little bit of call and response as well. I want to can we give it up briefly for Dr. Green, who just went? I think that was a great presentation. And a lot of what she stated is actually you're going to see elements of that in this presentation here, okay? So, community power building for health justice. One of the questions I want us to think through together is how can we really engage in community power building, and how can we do this through three different steps? One, we want to identify what the challenges and issues are. We want to begin to ignite and implement strategic steps and things that are going to help to impact our communities in powerful ways so that we can transform the healthcare system. I approach this work through the lens of collective impact. How many of you all are familiar with or heard of collective impact previously? Okay, one. Okay. So collective impact historically, the work was really talking about bringing together various organizations, right? Like how can organizations come together, establish a common agenda, think through how they can kind of share metrics and measurements, and really do meaningful work within communities. Let's say about 5 years or so ago, they inputted in that language the individual or the community member, which is essential to the work, right? So anytime you're thinking about collective impact or collective change, you have to first and foremost center the community in this work, right? So if we think about the 5 stages of collective impact, the first one, a common agenda, what is our purpose? What do we all seek to do? Not as individual organizations, our mission statement, but what is it that we all seek to do to change collectively together? What are some shared things that we can measure to show impact over time, right? This is not a one event and then it's done. But what does the work look like over time? What is our journey? I heard journey mentioned before in the word. What does our journey look like over time? And how do we measure impact over time? And so we want to make sure, too, that there are mutually reinforcing activities so that it's not just we did this event, we had this event today, and then we don't meet and we don't come together again. We want to make sure that the activities and the things that we do, we build momentum over time so that we can impact change in our communities. And we also want to make sure there's continuous communication, that people are talking to one another throughout the process and throughout the work. If you're bringing together the community members, if you're bringing together various organizations and coalitions, how are you all communicating with them on a daily basis? And are you only coming to them when you need something? And then also the final part of it is the backbone support. There always needs to be an organization, an agency, an advocate that is willing to step in as a lead role in helping to fuel it. They are not the only doer in the room. The room should be full of people that want to actively engage in it and support whatever the mission is as far as the goal the collective agenda is, but there should be a backbone support that's available and offered as well. So that's a little bit about what collective impact is. Community power building is similar to collective impact, but it takes a different stand. It's not only saying, yes, community members need to be at the table, but the people need to be centered in the work. They are not an afterthought. They are the decision makers. And we need to go beyond just hearing their voices, but we need to include them in the room when we're starting to talk about policy, when we're starting to talk about things that need to happen and actions that need to be taken, and when we're offering out funding, right? Sometimes what happens is that organizations receive the funding and the community doesn't, and the advocates don't, right? So community power building makes room and space for community to be in the building, in the room, but it's really also thinking about them as change agents, right? And that idea of them being change agents first rests on the premise that individual people have power. We have to dispel the myth that communities don't have power, communities of color don't have power, Black men don't have power, our youth don't have power, and our seniors don't have power. We need to dispel that myth. It's not someone that's gonna come in and save the community. The community needs to be able to have space and room to invest in change themselves, and they need support. But they don't need, I heard earlier, and I'm gonna mention it today, nothing for us without us, right? And that's part of the disability movement. That's one of the phrases that they say. You know, you can't do this work without first acknowledging that we need to be in the room. We need to occupy the space, and we need to occupy those seats, right? So I really want us to think through collective impact today as a strategy, but power building as the activation piece that needs to happen in order for collective impact to work, right? When community power building is done well and it's done successful, you notice a couple of things, and that's what I really want you all to think through too. It should be evident in the work, right? One, not only are clear agendas set, but there should be movement and energy seen within the space. There should be some type of shift in the public discourse. It's the difference between talking about people and having people share and tell their own stories, and having people advocate for themselves for change in the community. That doesn't mean that individuals are the only source of power and change within it. It means that coalitions, collectives, and organizations need to make sure we create space to engage them in a deeper, richer way, all right? So I mentioned before, nothing for us without us. I'm just gonna read this quick phrase. Community power building is particularly critical for underserved, underrepresented, and historically marginalized communities who have been excluded from decision-making on the policies and practices that impact their health and the health of their communities, right? So this is just an example of how power building was embedded in some work that took place out in California. And I wanted to share that with you all just as we think through like the possibilities of the various things that we can all do collectively together, right? So one example is from the Building Healthy Communities, which was funded by an endowment in California. And they really took organizing and base building and engaging community seriously and put that at the front and center core of their work. I always say this is like it always reminds me of a sunflower for some reason. Y'all see it? Is it just me? You can see it? Okay. I always say the sunflower diagram. My team is like, what? You know what I'm talking about. But this is the sunflower diagram if you ever want to. And then you have a one-pager here, too, from USC. And they provide a whole bunch of different strategies on power building and things that you can do to really thoughtfully engage community in meaningful ways and build on the strategies that you all are already utilizing within your various organizations and the work that you do on a day-to-day basis. And so a couple of things that stand out. One, advocacy and policy, thinking through how we are talking about the work, how we're advocating for change within our community. Communications and narrative change, how do we shift the dialogue about what people are saying about what the issues and the challenges are? Because oftentimes, the way it's framed in the media, people, especially people of color, are viewed as the issue and as a challenge, as opposed to as a part of the change that needs to happen within our communities, right? So being able to shift that dialogue. inviting additional coalitions and alliances to the table that are already out there, that already exist. How do we connect them to the work? And how do we make sure that there is funding for the work over time, right? Because of the work that they did out in California in this particular example, they were able to come up with over 1,200 policy and system change benefits to the community, right? The community was active in planning. They were active in executing it. So once again, it wasn't done without them. It was done with them. And then their ideas were also brought to the forefront of the table. In order to do this work, though, I always say one of the fundamental pieces is establishing authentic relationships. We talked earlier with Dr. Green, mentioned about mistrust. Oftentimes there's mistrust in the community because historically people have been underserved, people have been looked at or viewed as the afterthought as opposed to centered in the work, right? And so building trust is key and is important, right? And we have to think through like how we're showing up in spaces really thoughtfully and meaningfully engaging community and sharing a bit of who we are within that community. So reside in Richmond, Virginia now, but I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey. And I know they introduced me, they said Dr. Lamy. But if I go to certain places in my community, they don't care if I have a doctorate at all, right? It's more so, who are you? Where are you from? And what neighborhood did you grow up in, right? So if I'm here with X and, I'm from West Side, I'm over, oh, okay. All right, that's the validation in the room. People want to know who you are. I am all those things that were mentioned in my bio, but I'm also a mother of 3. My kids are 4, 5, and 6. So when I talk to parents, I use that as a way. Yes, they are 4, 5, and 6. That's another story and another presentation. But that shows up in my work with parents as a way like, hey, I can relate. I understand what it means to be a working mom and trying to do all of this and also the importance of a village within that situation, right? So thinking through like how do we share bits and pieces of our story to connect to the people in the room is also really, really important, right? So having these authentic relationships when you think about collective impact and power building is really important. There's some things I also want to throw out there because in order to build relationships and overcome some of the challenges and the mistrust that has historically been there because it's rooted in systemic racism, because of all of the challenges, and because I talk a lot in the education space. And one of the things I like to say is folks say education and school systems are not working. They actually are working. They're doing what they're designed to do. They were never designed to make sure that all young people had access to quality education. So in order for it to work, we have to transform it, right? It's inevitable. But in order to do that also, we have to think through, like, how do we create and build these relationships in thoughtful, meaningful ways and not say we're going to do something and then for whatever reason the ball is dropped, right? So I had put this diagram up there, and I think some of you probably can relate, especially because the work sometimes gets really dense and heavy. So on what side is it? On the right side of your screen, there are 12 ways to build trust, right? All of that looks good, right? We're going to honor our commitments, right? But then sometimes we run the challenge of overcommitting. We end up saying we try to do so much that we end up doing and accomplishing nothing at all, right? We say we're going to communicate properly, but sometimes there's a lack of clarity because we haven't taken the time to actually think through what it is that we want to do together. Not just what my idea is, but what is our collective idea and strategy. We say we're going to make careful and thoughtful decisions, but then there's a sense of urgency, as if there's a fire that's burning that has to be put out tomorrow. Unfortunately, a lot of the issues and challenges that we're facing now, today, have been around for quite some time, right? They weren't built overnight, and nor will the solution come overnight. Y'all agree? So you have to take time. We need to make sure there's a consistency. And then I put up there too, only listen to respond, because sometimes when folks are talking in groups and we're coming together and there's an organization that put everything together and then everyone is talking, they say, and then they have in their mind already the next thing they're gonna say out. They didn't take time to process the information in the room. That's a great way to get a whole lot of people at the first meeting and hardly anybody at the second, right? So we got to think through those things. You need to make sure there's transparency. We need to we need to also make sure that we're not avoiding conflict. Conflict is inevitable within the work. Everyone's not always going to agree. I always tell people never be too consumed by the size of the room and how many people are in the room. A lot of historical movements started with one or two people coming together and then bringing on additional people and additional people coming to the table, right? Dr. Green talked earlier about innovators. And in this work, it is all about innovation when you talk about systems change, right? But every innovation had to come from somewhere, right? But before it, there wasn't it, right? There was a time when we didn't have airplanes, we didn't have telephones, and now we have cell phones, right? Anybody remember the phones that used to hang on the phone booths? I see some seniors in the room, right? And now we got cell phones. Someone had to think of that. So what happens when we start with first understanding and believing the innovation is already in the room? Let's stop thinking about what we can't do. Let's stop focusing too much on the problem. Let's start thinking about the energy that's already in the room. The solutions are already in the room, especially when you bring youth to the table. They got a whole bunch of innovative ideas. Especially when you bring our seniors to the table. They've seen some stuff. They know some stuff, right? And so we need to think through how we create these shared spaces and engage community because a lot of the solutions are deep-rooted inside. But we have to create the space to make sure that they come out. I always like to, how many folks in the room have organizations or running their own organizations? Any organization leaders here? Okay, all right. Any advocates, activists, community leaders? Okay. Who's in the room? How are you showing up today? Just call out. We're just calling out. How are you showing up today? What role are you in? Caregiver? Service provider? I can't hear you over there. Clinicians? Okay. Okay. All right. This slide here is about addressing the elephant that's sometimes in the room as well. When you think about creating spaces, especially when you have the dynamic there where there are a lot of people with different titles, different roles, some are organizations, some are community leaders, et cetera. And then you have to enter into the space, you have to think through power dynamics as well. So we're actually going to do a power mapping activity after this. But I want you all to enter into it thinking through these things too. So one, sharing power is hard. You know, I used to always do, I haven't done one, that is just, that is a reminder that I have to do that with my current team. But I haven't done one yet with my current team. But one of the things I used to do is I used to have these meetings with my team, my staff, and they would be cap-off meetings, hats off, meaning no titles, just ideas, no titles. And we would throw out all the ideas. It was the innovation space, all the ideas. No one like, oh my God, there's no way in the world we can do it. And we didn't talk about what we couldn't do. We just talked about all the possibilities, right? And they had some ideas sometime, and I was just like, I don't know about that. I don't think that we should do that. And they were like, listen, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I would get outvoted in the organization that I was leading. And I would say, you know what? You have the vision for that. I can't fully see it yet. You all voted that that's what we're going to do. So you're going to lead it, and we're going to support your leadership of it, right? That requires sharing power. It's hard sometimes, but that a lot of the changes, a lot of the innovation that I've been able to do has come because of that. Because a parent came up to me in my work with young people and said, listen, I love your program. I know if my kid completes your program, they'll get a full scholarship to college. However, they have to work this summer. And I said, okay, so that's an issue we got to address together. We partnered with the city. We employed young people. We trained our teens to teach our middle school kids about high school. They created their own lesson plans, and they implemented them. An idea that came from a parent. You know what I mean? So imagine what happens. That's just one, but imagine what happens when we take those those challenges seriously, and we start thinking about how we can use the resources that we have within community and actually create assets, right? By bridging those gaps, right? But we have to share power. We have to think through also sharing resources. We need to make sure that we're not focused solely on our organization's mission, that we forget that it's not just about us individually, it's about us collectively, right? And so sometimes it's like, oh, well, if we do, I always tell folks, if we do this work well, and you're an organization and you're a nonprofit, technically, you should all either put yourself out of business or within 10 years from now have a new mission statement. Does anybody know an organization, a nonprofit, that ever had to redo their mission statement because they fulfilled it? Anybody? They had to redo the mission. Oh, we got to tell that story. What, an organization had to redo their mission statement because they fulfilled it? Or they just changed it because they wanted to change it? Mm-hmm. Yes. Uh-huh. That's what we should all be aiming for, right? We should be aiming for fulfilling those mission statements, but complex issues require complex solutions, right? Any mission or organization sets forth cannot be completed alone, especially within the nonprofit sector or the community sector. We have to begin thinking through how we all work together. Thank you for sharing that example. Oh, the last one here is that I hear this oftentimes. Historically, we don't work together. And I put that there too because that's also an elephant in the room, because I've seen organizations and folks come together and they're doing pretty much similar things, but for whatever reason, maybe the former CEOs or the former staff didn't get along and they don't work together. And sometimes it's so historical, they don't even know what the root cause of the issue is, right? But it's hindering the work. And so what I used to say also is, like, when I'm working in communities and I'm serving young people, everyone's not going to like you, everyone's not going to love you. But if you come to me and you need something and it's regarding young people, our passion work, our focus, our drive, our energy, that we should share that common agenda, and we should want and be willing to support one another, right? And we need to be able to break down those barriers as well. So a bulk of the breakout session group is going to talk about power with, power to, and power within. That's what we're going to use as part of our work in our power maps, right, that we're going to develop together, right? But that requires us breaking down the belief and the myth of the have and the have-nots, right? And that is the power over category, right? And power over suggests that power is seen as finite, You have it or you don't, right? People use coercion or force to kind of intimidate people in order to keep their power, right? And that, a lot of times when people say either you have it or you don't, they view people in community as being powerless, right? And if we think that we're powerless, we'll never be able to change anything, right? So I encourage you all to look deep within and think about yourself first and foremost, and also your community. And let's think about our community. What do we have the power to do, right? What is it that we can all come together and we can say we have the ability to change this, right? And if we're going to change it, what's our power within? Within ourselves or within our organizations that we represent or the work that we do to actually do it, right? And then who do we have power with? Who else needs to be at the table in order for this change to happen or occur? Who's missing? Who do we need to engage? Who do we need to partner with? Who needs to fund it? Okay? So the activity that you all will have in your breakout rooms is you'll see a sheet that looks like this. And this sheet will walk you through how to develop a power map, right? And so I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. I hope we are all on one accord. What do you feel should be the center of the power map? We're talking about collective impact, we're talking about power building. Who should be in the center of our power maps based on what we've been talking about so far? Go ahead, it's okay. We're all in this together. The individual. Or the people, yes, the people, the community that is centered in it, yes. And you had something to add, sir? Okay, all right. And then you start thinking through all of those resources, right? So I want y'all to join me in something and touch your neighbor briefly and say, neighbor, an asset is a resource, but every resource is not an asset. An asset is a resource, but every resource is not an asset. Then what is a resource? A resource is a potential asset that has been untapped. It hasn't been activated, right? My sneakers can be a resource for me going and jogging around this building a couple of times. But they don't become an asset until I put them on my what? My feet. All right? So when you're doing the power map, think about your resources and your assets. And how do you activate the resources? And how do you better utilize your assets? How do you activate your resources? And how do you utilize your asset? Community, the ground of community is the forefront of it, right? So if we're saying, think about the various spaces in which whoever's in the center, youth are in the center, where are they? Where do they go? Where are the spaces that they occupy? Who are the people that they connect with? What is it that they're saying that they need, right? Same thing for seniors. I know there's a group on youth, a group on seniors. Are we doing the black men group as well? Okay, youth and seniors. So based on those groups, who's in the room already? What are they saying that they need? Who's missing from the room? Who do we need to tap into? What are the resources and what are the assets? Okay? And that can be community, local, state, national, etc. All right? Questions. I see faces that are thinking. Questions. Y'all ready to build power? Are y'all ready to build power? Okay. Anybody have a question? Okay. Can you have access to the slides? I will talk to the Arthur Ashe Institute folks to kind of get a sense of what we could do with that. Okay? All right. So I'm gonna turn it over to them to break you into sessions. You all are gonna go and do the power map. Do not be too consumed with getting it quote unquote right. That's not the point. The point is to build relationships within your group, learn about the people within your group, where are your resources, where are your assets, how you can work together, right? So, and then we'll come back and we'll have a discussion on the power mapping activity. That sounds good? All right. Thank you.
I think Dr. Lamy deserves a warm round of applause for the excellent job that she just did.
Hi, everyone. If you could please make your way to the seats so we can so we can start the debriefing conversation. All right. So we're going to ask the representatives from each of the groups if you can kind of send one rep to the front that'll help share out on the power building activity that you did. We just want a top level report out. Keep it as if it's almost like an elevator pitch, like no more than 2 minutes. How long, everyone? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Okay. So we would like the senior group to go first because we want to honor our elders. So can someone from the senior group go first?
What's the question?
So if you can just give us a top-level feedback or on what
On
your
our
group,
discussion.
Yes, talk
Okay,
about what
so
your power
I
map.
was in a group with senior citizens. I'm much too young for that, but I was in a group of senior citizens. I like to be around older people. And so we discussed how can we be more effective? How can seniors be more effective in their healthcare advocacy and doing things that they're concerned about. So first we addressed a few issues. And one of the issues was that seniors have trouble advocating for themselves. As a matter of fact, our director was telling us how she was advocating for her mother and some relatives. Another thing that we discovered, another senior brought up an issue that I'd never thought about, and they picked up by accessoride. And sometimes they might be an accessoride for two hours, driving all over the city. Now, if that was a profitably run operation and people were paying out of their pocket, they would never take them an hour or two out of the way. But since they're getting the money from the city or the state, they don't give them very good services. So we talked about that. We also talked about, indirectly, white coat syndrome and how some seniors, because of race or age or color or sexuality, don't advocate for themselves. And so we talked about a lot of issues, and then we said, well, what can the seniors do about it? And we know the way that people are getting things done in America now is what? Collective bargaining. You know, doctors do collective bargaining. They belong to IPAs. And doctors get together and negotiate with health plans. Not as one doctor, but as 500 doctors. It's 250 doctors. They belong to a union. So what can seniors do? And so we decided that the seniors should get together with their senior citizen directors and say to them, 5 or 6 of them, get together, talk to each other, and then bring in the elected officials in 3 or 4 months. And let's talk to the people, somebody from the city council, somebody from the state assembly, somebody from the state senate, somebody from Congresswoman Yvette Clarke's office, and other representatives, and tell them what our pain is. We should invite them in as well as the Commissioner of the Department of Aging would handle senior citizen issues. So we talked about the problems that we're having as seniors. How do we address these problems? How do we find adequates? And what's the solution? And another thing we were all in agreement that we were absolutely delighted that the Arthur Ashe Foundation had this wonderful conference, and we wanted them to cover another one in maybe 3 months or 4 months when we can get together. So today was just a starting step. There are a lot of strong seniors, especially this beautiful woman right here, my granddaughter, who was one of the leading advocates of what we did. Have I answered your question or not?
Yes, thank
you
so much. And there was also a professionals group, a clinician group. Do we have a speaker from there to report out? They're showing. Okay, can a speaker from the youth group come forward?
Hi. So I appreciate that because I'm sort of a youth, but not. My name is Keely. I'm reporting out from the youth group. We had a really wonderful conversation mostly about social media usage with youth, because we're finding that it's a hotbed of bullying and extremism. So we wanted to think about ways to empower youth, to enhance their discernment, to connect them to themselves, and we came up with a statement: the power to define and boldly claim their self-identity, awareness, concept in a protected manner. So we talked about who we could involve in this project, and this work is already happening, but we want it to be more cohesive, more enhanced, and we talked about stakeholders like teachers. We talked about the role of places like the Arthur Ashe Institute, places like clinics, hospitals, community centers. We talked about the role of older youth and how mentorship could assist in learning how to discern on social media, because not all of us grew up on social media. We talked about bilateral sort of connections with elders, just in order to share expertise mutually. And that relationship is not always looked at that way, but there's a lot of richness there to be explored. And we talked about just places in the community where we could have safe spaces, open conversation, counseling, and connecting youth with trusted, socially responsible, transparent, non-judgmental places where they can, again, define and boldly claim their self-concept in a protected manner. We did briefly talk about suicidality in youth. I would have liked to get into that a little bit more, but we really focused on where we could have some immediate impact and how we can connect. How do we feel about that youth group?
Thank you.
Okay.
Is the last final group down yet? So there are a couple of things. First off, give you all yourselves a round of applause. I've been in Virginia now for about 4.5 years. I was like, oh, I sound so country right now. Give y'all selves. I'm a Jersey girl, but I had to pause on that when that words came out my mouth. But a couple of things also I want you to add in your future discussions, because a power map, I always tell people, it's almost like a strategic plan. It should always be evolving and continue to build on it, right? It's not set in stone. So you should always be asking yourself and be mindful of who's at the table, who else can we invite to the table. I put at the last bullet, make sure there's ongoing conversations about who is missing and who should be added. So for instance, in the youth power map, we talked about who was missing in the room for that youth power map that we were talking about yesterday. The youth. It was a lot of parents there, and they spoke about their experiences working with their children, but we would really love to make sure youth are at the table next time, right? So how can we build that up? You also need to be mindful of when and why people leave the table, right? Sometimes it's because they may not be as actively engaged in the work. And sometimes it's because the work isn't happening or being done in the way in which they envision it, right? Ultimately, understand that everyone will not be equally invested or involved and engaged within the work. And that's okay. You don't necessarily need everybody, but you should be inclusive, right? There are going to be times when you're doing power mapping or when you're doing the work where some people are just going to be more invested in certain parts of it than others. There's a difference between having a collaborating partner that's an ally and just having an ally. They may just show up if you're having an event or if you're hosting something, but they may not be a collaborating partner deeply rooted in doing the work with you. But you should be inclusive and invite everyone to the table and make sure that folks know what's going on. Because just because they're not at the table today and they say they don't want to be involved in the work today doesn't mean that they may not want to be involved in it tomorrow, okay? And that also ties into the open communication. I also wanted you all to think about not necessarily always having to approach the work through the lens of we have to now create another coalition. We have to now create another ecosystem. We have to now create another collective, especially if they already exist, right? You can think about how to connect the dots and connect the tissues with tables that are already there and not necessarily go into trying to create and invent new spaces all the time. Sometimes another table is actually just another meeting, unfortunately, and people don't have the time to do that. So how do you begin to show up and actively engage in the spaces that are already there and think through the common agenda within those spaces as well, all right? Are there any other thoughts or comments that you all wanted to share out based on what you talked through?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany. So we're just coming back from the mental health provider breakout session. So I'm just gonna give like a brief breakdown of what we discussed, and if I miss anything, folks from the group could chime in. But essentially, we spoke about first question that was asked was like, okay, what is a provider? And in the group, we realized after introducing ourselves, a provider is more than just being in the clinical space and understanding that we're all providers as parents, as caregivers, in the clinical space, in the non-clinical space. Let me just kind of get my thoughts together. And so that was the first thing we kind of highlighted. And then speaking through the needs that, well, the things that are needed within mental health spaces we spoke about clinical evaluation and care, access to resources. I'm trying to name them on top of my head. The next one. Yes, caregiver education, guidance, support, how to ask for support, language. We talked about having a trusted, safe space, being able to check in and follow up, and recognizing the awareness of humanity and gaining awareness through others and experiences, right? A lot of people shared their own personal stories, and we talked about how through those experiences, it's allowed them to gain awareness. I don't want to go too much in depth because I don't want to publicly share everyone's stories, but you know, I hope that was kind of making sense a little bit. And then through that, we highlighted the needs and we understood what the needs were, and then speaking about what is the assets and the resources that we currently have for those things. And so we listed those out, and then we spoke about how Downstate is a resource and an asset, how Kings County is an asset and a resource, the barbershops and hair salons we work with here at the Arthur Ashe Institute, and even a lot of spaces within Downstate that are being underutilized, and how can we get people from outside to utilize those spaces, hiring therapists and other mental health providers to come in, and also like taking care of patients and patient care within those spaces. And then come to find out that there are a lot of outpatient care services, and we talked about the gaps that the gaps that are currently here. We can have a lot of conversations about what's needed in the community and opening up all these other organizations and running all these spaces, and recognizing that a lot of these things is happening in silos. So how can we come together as a community to be able to share those resources and work together? Out of that conversation, we talked about outpatient care. And so kind of to end the conversation was, okay, we understand there are gaps, and then there are resources and underutilized spaces. And so can we list some spaces that we all know about, so that we are aware of it? And through that, we learned that there's Suite O in Downstate, we have Suite B, Suite D, Suite R, and these are all outpatient care services. We have other organizations such as Baltic Street, Respite Centers, NYC 988, and Mentally Parenting, and these are all different types of organizations. And if it wasn't for this space, we wouldn't have known about them. If it wasn't for this space, we wouldn't have known about all these other services that are being provided here at Downstate. And so we came to like this solution-based conclusion in that there are things that are already existing, and now that we know, we can share it amongst each other and share it with other people within the community. So yeah, if I missed anything else, other people on the team can include or add. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you all for your time. And just two pieces I do want to leave you with. When we think about power and our collective impact in the work that we do towards health justice, one, it's really important to make sure that we're always continuing to center the people most impacted within the work. As I stated earlier and throughout the presentation, they should be at the table when key decisions are made. They should be at the table when we're thinking about policy changes and so on and so forth, right? So whether it's youth, whether it's seniors, whether it's Black men, whether it's people with disabilities, et cetera, and the list goes on, we need to make sure that they are actively engaged in those spaces when we're thinking through what's the quote-unquote collective plan, what's our common agenda, right? And then the last and final piece is create transformational systems. In order to create transformational systems, we need to think about how they evolve over time with, for, and by youth, families, in the community, right? So the system needs to change over time. It's continuously changing and evolving. A transformational system is not just quote unquote a new system. We're not gonna go from the current healthcare system just to an entirely new system and it be etched in stone for the next 2 or 3 decades. We need to create a system that centers youth and families in the community, so as key decision makers, they're constantly impacting the various things that are happening with the system. The system is transforming and evolving because of them. So if new issues or challenges come up, hey, COVID, we're not in shock.
with what our strategy should be, because it's constantly in tune with the people. Our outreach is constantly in tune with the people. So I want folks to think about that too, because there's a lot about transformational systems and all of it. It's this new big thing. But if you, I always say, if you take a system and you destroy it, you dismantle it, and you don't invest time and energy into what you're creating, you'll end up with a bigger boogeyman than what you started with. So we have to invest the time and energy into making sure that we're thoughtfully engaging one another and planning our next steps, because the opposition always is. Thank you.
So we want to thank Dr. Lammy. We want to thank everyone that participated in the first half of this program.